And once again, I want to say greetings to each and every one of you. Akwaba. Welcome. Welcome to another round of the Conscious Rasta Report here on LIV Radio, LIV TV, here on livinginblack.com. My name is Kedia Wado, aka the Conscious Rasta. Weekday mornings, you and I get together live. We come at you from 9 a.m. Pacific time. That's 12 noon Eastern time, 5 p.m. GMT, and 8 p.m. East Africa time. We get together with you, and we deal with culture, consciousness, historical perspectives. We deal with entertainment, economics, education, health, labor, law, politics, religion, family, conflict, future studies, all areas of human interactivity and development. Today's date, it's Tuesday. It is the 24th of February, the year 2026 in the Western Gregorian calendar. This corresponds to the year 6266 in the calendar of ancient Kemet, to which we have realigned our cultural clock. Welcome to the 7th millennium. You have found your family in a peaceful place here on LIV Radio, LIV TV, here on livinginblack.com. Yeah, man. That's what we are dealing with. And we are once again continuing our African Hour Story series of broadcasts. For the longest history in the world, we have joined the months of February and March together. And so what I'm doing during this month, I'm bringing you up on my personal journey, and I'm loving the fact that many of you are coming along with me. Some of you this month have become new listeners. And I want to say I'm very grateful for that. I'm grateful to my LIV Radio listening audience for bringing your friends and your family along on our sacred journey. It's a beautiful thing, a very beautiful thing. So here's what we're doing today. Let me give you the introduction to today's program. We're dealing with two more of my books. This one, Panic, what the coronavirus pandemic tells us about the state of the world. And we're also in our second hour going to be focusing on Fade to Black, the passing of a great race. In the first hour, we dissect the 2020 COVID-19 crisis as a revealing lens on global vulnerabilities, elite conspiratorial manipulations, and systemic failures. This analysis questions pandemic narratives, vaccine rushes, economic shutdowns, and media fear tactics, urging self-reliant health strategies and Pan-African preparedness against future biopolitical blackmail. Fade to Black, the passing of a great race, warns of an African American's demographic decline, projecting only up to 45 years left due to falling fertility since the 1960s, the obesity epidemics, cop killings, abortion, and iatrogenic deaths by doctor. Chronic diseases like diabetes and hypertension, abortion, all of the above are plaguing us, as well as diseases like diabetes and hypertension, poor economic patterns. As my 38th book, it synthesizes decades of research urging behavioral transformation for survival amid population control threats. So that's what we have up for today. It's about to get deep now. The books are getting much, much thicker as I'm continuing to write. And these books come out in the summer of 2020. It's about to get deeper because I've had 20 books or so, maybe over 20 books coming out since 2020. We're going to do the best we can. So Fade to Black is our second hour book. First hour, let's deal with this one. Pandemic, or Panic. becoming declaration of a pandemic, the world has plunged into a massive economic depression. Human relations have dramatically changed. Nothing will ever be the same again. Is all of this worth the panic? In the light of historical review, decades from today, future generations will need to know that there was dissent against the story of this COVID-19 pandemic. I am proud to be one of the few voices dissenting against the distortion of science which has characterized the coronavirus infection. Let us allow data-backed scientific evidence to have its say, unfiltered by self-interested propagandists that are exploiting the public's incomprehension of scientific matters. For 40 years, I have been engaged in the spectrum of health science studies, including virology, epidemiology, immunology, and cell biology. The world is in the grip of an epidemic of bad science, opportunism, misinformation, and hysterical propaganda. You know my work surrounding nutrition and the 7 principles of optimal health. As you live within these protective immune system guidelines, you'll be pretty much safe from the spectrum of infectious and non-communicable diseases. You can declare yourself free from these infectious virus plagues and panic and hysteria. I'm doing my best to teach as many as who would receive that which I have learned, studying every day, and that which illuminates a clear pathway to a thriving, sustainable future. So we're doing the best we can. Let's get into the book. Panic, what the coronavirus pandemic tells us about the state of the world. Number 1, I begin with challenging the popular narrative. I begin each chapter with a quote. The first quote is from Stevie Wonder. When you believe in things that you don't understand, then you suffer. Superstition ain't the way. Nothing will ever be the same again. Most everyone remembers, I'm skipping just slightly, most everyone remembers where they were on November 22nd, 1963, when they received the news that the beloved president of the nation, John F. Kennedy, was killed by assassination. The president's murder was a terrifying international tragedy that happened against a background of Cold War terror hanging over the heads of nearly everyone in the world, with its accompanying threat of wholesale nuclear annihilation. This menace of nuclear war was so pervasive for so long that I can recall on several occasions waking up after nightmares of seeing the missiles flying and atomic explosions on the horizon. I can recall similar tragic memories of April 4, 1968, when again assassination took the life of our hero, the Nobel Prize-winning Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It was an unbearable shock that caused a nation and many around the world to weep uncontrollably. Within days, several U.S. cities had exploded into rebellion, riot, and revolution. A violent reactionary response to the depth of our feelings for our hero, as well as unleashing of the pent-up pressures from the crippling racism, which was buried just below the surface of the larger society. Again, I talk about these moments. We talk about the murder of Bobby Kennedy 2 months after the murder of Dr. King. I'm putting all this into context because what we reacted to at that time, now that decades have passed, we realize we were reacting to something completely different. The decades that have passed, John Kennedy's murderers have been exposed. Everyone needs a book, The Unspeakable, JFK and the Unspeakable, why he was assassinated and why it matters. And you need to get the book on Dr. King's murders, a series of books by William F. Pepper, including Orders to Kill, An Act of State, etc. Now we know so much more than we knew in the aftermath. The fear of urban uprisings in American cities in response to the long history of racial oppression, these violent riots, uprisings began in Watts, Los Angeles. I'm going to skip down. I'm skipping over. The global recession. One more I'm going to expose. September 11, 2001. We can nearly all recall vividly the shocking images of airplanes crashing into the World Trade Center in New York City. These were accompanied by a broader set of frightening scenes of the buildings collapse, other buildings seemingly not even directly impacted by the initial catastrophe also collapsing, along with huge holes in the ground in Pennsylvania and the walls of the Pentagon of the nation's capital. Within weeks of 9/11, there was unleashed upon the world a violent reaction that produced a series of military assaults that have maimed and killed millions. This, quote, new Pearl Harbor, unquote, event provoked the destruction of the economies and infrastructure of Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Yemen, and Somalia, as these wars also severely impacted the lives of people around the planet. What I am saying, it was all ruse, all set up. And now we're looking closer at the COVID-19 pandemic. And there have been many revelations that came out after this book came out. But I'm proud to say this book pretty much hit everything right. Again, this comes out in June, at the end of June 2020. So we're really just getting into the pandemic at that point. Let me skip forward. It seems sometimes like the inmates have taken over the asylum. Let me say Ubuntu, Hotep. I see you in the house for Africa One. I hope you didn't hear me sip. I didn't sip. Thank you for being with me, beloved. With us, you are always, always an honor and a pleasure to see in our family. One constant from all these significant societal tragedies is the widespread response of fear and panic within the larger society. As with previous episodes, the role of mass media in fueling our natural fears to hysteria is critically relevant to the creation of fear, anxiety, and panic. We are excited to reactionary responses that often aren't even directly related to the crisis at hand. We wonder just what could have possibly motivated a public reaction to the danger of an alleged infectious disease outbreak by raiding all of the nation's grocery store shelves and with days buying up all available toilet paper. While with HIV/AIDS, it was condoms. Now it's toilet paper. It sometimes seems like, quote, the inmates have taken over the asylum, close quote. And there's no denying that these new wardens of the madhouse want us all to succumb to fear, panic, and subsequent hysteria toward the aim of changing behaviors on a broad scale. And that whole toilet paper incident has now been revealed as a scam. All they had to do was show images of about 4 people loading up their carts with toilet paper, and it was on. And you could not find toilet paper. I'm going, don't panic. Here's a quote. This quote is from U.S. coronavirus count has ticked up, but 5 experts say you really shouldn't be panicking. From Kaiser Health News, January 27, 2020. Here's the quote. Don't panic unless you're paid to panic. Brown, an epidemiologist, told Kaiser Health News. Public health workers should be on the lookout. The government should be ready to provide resources. But for everyone else, breathe. That's good advice to avoid a major overreaction. Panic, I write, panic compels a powerful but negative sense of urgency. What is the difference between panic and urgency? I'm continuing to read from the Kaiser Health News. Panic is a sudden, overwhelming fear with or without cause that produces hysterical or irrational behavior. And that often spreads quickly through a group of persons. We have all seen what panic looks like. Panic has no sense of purpose. Panic makes us run away from the problem. Panic gives a sense of hopelessness. Panic says there is no way out. For example, I am claustrophobic. When I feel trapped, I panic. So now you understand where the title of the book comes from. The next subchapter, redefining FEAR and PANIC. It is not rare to hear someone referring to the word fear by reciting a common perspective on the acronym FEAR as to stand for false evidence appearing real. I'm troubled by this frequently expressed understanding of fear. First, it is inconsistent, contradictory, and oxymoronic. False, quote unquote, and evidence, quote unquote, are oxymorons. The two words don't naturally fit together. Quote, false is untrue, while evidence is actual. Thus attaching the two concepts, creating a neutralizing effect of one word on the other. If something is false, then there is no evidence for its reality. If something is evidence, then its mere existence cannot be regarded as false. If something is evidence, its existence means it cannot be regarded as false. But because of years of study and training in the deep structure of language, I recognize that dichotomies like this confuse the subconscious mind, which is seeking to create consistency from cognition and to eliminate such contradictory ideas. False evidence doesn't exist. Second, the concept of something, quote, appearing real is similarly a confusing idea. This phrase conjures up notions of apparitions, ghosts, phantoms, or chimeras, things feared, imagined, or hoped for, which are in truth illusional. If something is, quote, appearing real, then it is not real. As such, this non-reality should not be allowed to occupy one's mindset as substance, even in reaction. Thus, appearing real, quote unquote, is purely subjective and not objective. The word real implies objectivity. Subjectivity is dependent upon numerous flexible factors, any of which can be altered to shed a new perspective on what is, objectively implying that all of the facts are present, that they are consistent, and that we have compliance with scientific procedures used to validate reality. I'm going to skip forward. This is really good. But the cognitive mind is a marvelous instrument that is constantly being updated, its software being refined toward the aim of making life better. The old archaic understanding of FEAR can be redirected from an anchor to trigger maladaptive reactions toward something that is essentially empowering. As it stands now, induce fear through propaganda methodologies. is utilized as a psychic tool to excite and ultimately control behaviors. As self-actuating, empowered people, it would serve us best to redefine FEAR. As well, the first word, panic, PANIC. This offers a great vehicle for creating an empowering acronym. Here's what my Futurenomics Mastermind Group Focus produced. FEAR, forward thinking, planning, and acting for the future. E, evolving economic development to enable sustainability. A, Africa holds the resources to solve the world's problems. And R, restructure existing spending to repair ourselves. Similarly, the word panic compels a highly motivating but usually negative sense of urgency. We would be best to redefine to serve it as an empowering paradigm. P stands for produce products and services. A, as alchemists, it's all in, no half-stepping. N, nature provides for us the best medicine. I, investing intelligently toward intentional return on investment. And C, culture is the vehicle to consolidate civilization. I have come to recite the empowering mantra of the new FEAR, FEAR, and PANIC as part of my daily affirmations. Because of this reorientation, I am constantly reinforcing my ability to responding positively when these society-wide triggers appear within my cognitive ingestion of information that too often triggers excitation, external controlling, motivation, and the urgency in the form of fear and panic. Realigned towards self-determined empowerment, for me, these fear and panic triggers only reinforce autonomous development. So I'm going forward and I'm talking about why I'm compelled to write the book. Let's go to chapter 2, the epidemic. I began with this quote from Dr. Joseph Nuth. Earth is due for an extinction level event from the sky. And even if we don't see it coming, we won't be able to do anything about it. From Dr. Joseph Nuth, NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. What is this virus? Is the first question, first subchapter. There are multiple analyses of just what is this virus agent said to be at the center of the current world pandemic. Even within the peer-reviewed scientific publications that I have accessed, differing descriptions of this virus have appeared. As we add the chatter from a spectrum of news outlets and combine those descriptions with the frequency of chaotic mess emanating from social media on the internet, various explanations abound. For this book, as much as possible, I attempt to stay close to what is accepted as valid, objective science. Because so much of the global pandemic is not necessarily purely scientific, obviously parts of the book will deal with what does of that which does not rely upon the struggle to attain the pure objectivity, which is the aim of the scientific method. When we ask, quote, what is this virus? There is a presumption that we're talking about the same single agent reported to be at the center of the declared global pandemic. This identification has been slightly complicated by the various names which have been utilized to identify it. Differing identities which have come to my attention have included 1. The 2019 M-CoV, 2. COVID-19, 3. SARS-CoV-2, and 4. the coronavirus. For weeks, I had preferred to use 2019 nCoV. That was 2019 N, not M, nCoV, as it contained the N, which stood for novel. This was important because in calling this particular agent novel, it implied that there were other coronaviruses that might be garnering our attention. In more recent weeks, I've been using COVID-19 more often only because it's shorter and quicker to write. Skipping down, what is novel coronavirus 2019? Within the peer-reviewed scientific literature, there are 7 general classifications of coronaviruses reportedly in circulation. The first human coronavirus were identified in the mid-1960s. It is reported that there are 4 common and 3 less common coronaviruses that can infect people. That's what they're reporting. The following descriptions are from a variety of sources, including multiple references obtained from Wikipedia. Common human coronaviruses include 1. HCOV-22229E, the alpha coronavirus. Human coronavirus 229E is a species of coronavirus that infects humans and bats. The infecting virus is an enveloped, positive sense, single-stranded RNA virus that enters its host cell by binding to the APN receptor. Along with human coronavirus OC43, it's one of the viruses responsible for the common cold. That from Wikipedia. Number 2, NL63, alpha coronavirus. Human coronavirus NL63 or HCOV NL63 is a species of coronavirus that was identified in late 2004 in a 7-month-old Netherlands child with bronchiolitis. The infecting virus was an enveloped, positive sense, single-stranded RNA virus that entered its host by the ACE2 receptor. Number 3. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these, but you have to understand, in doing this deep scientific research, I had to go and find everything we could find out about coronavirus. When this book came out, it had 173 peer-reviewed references, some of which you're hearing right now. And at first, Amazon refused to print it. They refused to print it because of the cover. So what I did was I took the cover and I blacked out everything that had to mention about the coronavirus, COVID-19, or pandemic. I blacked them out. The first cover came out, and there was all these blackouts on it. And then they printed it. And later, I was able to put it back out with the cover intact. So if you got the first edition, printing edition of this, you'll notice that the cover has words redacted all over it. I see you in the house, Brother Eddie. Grand Rising, he says. It's great to have you with us. 1 second while I clear my throat, as well as clear my nose. And I'm back with you. So I'm going to give you one more of these, but there are a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 coronaviruses. 19 coronaviruses by the time this pandemic hits. The third one is HCOV-OC43. Human coronavirus OC43 is a member of the species beta coronavirus 1, which infects humans and cattle. The infecting coronavirus is an enveloped, positive sense, single-stranded RNA virus, which enters its host cell by binding to the N-acetyl-9-O acetyllenurulamic acid receptor. Now, that's a lot. But you think I'm just making this stuff up? I don't think so. YouTube discounted, threw me off of YouTube, dumped 2,000 videos that I had up there because I was reading this to you on the air, and I was not allowed to. I was not sanctioned. Later, we found out that Joe Biden had a list, a targeted list of black people and white people, progressives. They used that targeted list to eliminate people like Dr. Joe McCullough, what's his name, Mike Adams, Dr. Gary Null, and a bunch of us, including John Rappaport and Christine Farber. They used those lists to eliminate us from Alphabet, Google, and that's what became. Other coronaviruses, MERS-CoV, beta coronavirus, that's from the Middle East, respiratory syndrome, SARS-CoV, beta coronavirus, severe acute respiratory syndrome. That sounds to me like pneumonia. SARS-CoV, which this one briefly was referred to as SARS-CoV-2, and SARS only means severe acute respiratory virus. That sounds to me like the viral blaming of pneumonia. nCoV, novel coronavirus, 2019 novel coronavirus, severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2 is the virus strain that causes coronavirus disease 2019, a respiratory illness colloquially known as the coronavirus. It was previously referred to by its provisional name 2019 novel coronavirus 2019 nCoV. SARS-CoV-2 is a positive sense single-stranded RNA virus. It is contagious in humans, and the World Health Organization has designated the ongoing pandemic of COVID-19 to be a public health emergency of international concern. And then there it goes. I then talk about animal coronaviruses. There are about 11 of those. I'm going to skip forward. We shall, as well, there are coronaviruses that are said to infect other animals in addition to these 19. These include CoVs to pigs, bats, felines, and raccoon dogs, and Asian fox-related species, also called mangut, tanuki, or nyoguri. There are at least 19 identified coronaviruses. There could be yet any number yet to be, quote, discovered. Later in this book, I have a chapter called A Brief Tutorial on Viruses, and I suggest you read this book, because at the end of that chapter of A Brief Tutorial on Viruses, and I'm going to get to some of that here in just a little bit, I say we should discard 126 years at that time of virology. Throw it in the garbage can as junk science. Viruses, the idea that viruses cause disease, it's all fake. It's all fake. I said it twice. Going forward, here's what's said. It helps to examine the details of today while relying on comprehension of the facts of the past. Coronaviruses have been studied for at least 65 years. Until recently, they have been dismissed as only producing mild cold-like symptoms. Quote, the medical community was amazed by the emergence of a new coronavirus associated with SARS in healthy adults in 2003. Historically, human COVID infections, 229E and OC43 COVID strains, were mild and associated with only common cold symptoms. Although reinfections, even with the same strain, occur, the genus coronavirus is composed of at least 3 genetically and autogenically distinct groups of COVID that cause mild to severe enteric, respiratory, or systemic diseases in domestic and wild animals, poultry, rodents, and carnivores, and mild colds in humans. Emphasis added. Read it. All of these references, that references from learning from SARS, preparing for the next disease outbreak, workshop summary by Nobler and Mohammed A. Lemon et al. From National Academy's Free Press. So I'm going to start skipping big sections of the book. Can the COVID-19 cavalry save you? I have a number of bullet points. The COVID-19 cavalry is racing forward to save us from this species-jumping viral alien invasion. I have even come to compare this situation to the best-made zombie apocalypse films of the generation, because the public has become so excited to a panic-driven sense of urgency to do something to alleviate their hysteria. A humongous collection of would-be saviors are sprinting forward to offer us relief from our hysteria and make more than a few dollars profit for their trouble. The virus consists of, but mostly is not limited to, one, this cavalry exists of, but not limited to, number one, the Academy of Virology scientists, many of whom are seeking notoriety, Anthony Fauci. Two, and Anthony Fauci is not new. Anthony Fauci was exposed as a fraud during the AIDS pandemic. But if you didn't study the AIDS pandemic, you didn't recognize him. Two, they are heads of epidemiology departments in federal, regional, and local governing agencies, along with their counterparts in colleges and universities serving their regional needs. Point three, the World Health Organization, the cavalry, always quick to declare a transnational emergency, thus justifying its preeminence over a global health apparatus. Number four, many are NGOs across a broad base of functional services, including those involved in healthcare and medical services. Point, news media and overly ambitious journalists are seeking the glory of a compelling, captivating narrative. And just one more of these. One more. The drug companies are always seeking ways to increase their return on investment in drugs, medical technology, testing, vaccines, and protective gear. Some from this vast healthcare complex are quick to seize this sense of urgent emergency to fast track the development of drugs and vaccines. As well, this group welcomes subsidization from emergency declaration funding that is used to subsidize the provision of medical services to the public. So then I talk Doggone it, doggone it. I just read a couple of paragraphs. And we're talking about Anthony Fauci. And I'm sorry, I think I had, well, it's whatever it is. I'll go back and clean it up later. Quote, wet markets in China, where exotic animals undergo cruel and unhygienic slaughter caused by the current pandemic, as they did SARS, say experts. Dr. Anthony Fauci of the White House Coronavirus Task Force says he is incredulous that wet markets are still open. It boggles my mind how, when we have so many diseases that emulate out of that unusual human-animal interface, that we don't just, quote, shut it down, he said. I don't know what else has to happen to get us to appreciate that. Well, shut down the CAFOs. Then we'll believe you. And thank you for telling me that the sound was off. I don't know how long it was off. I thought I had turned it back on, but I may have missed that. We're going to do the best we can to just keep going forward, doing better, doing better. I'm now going to skip forward, and we've been talking about the epidemic, mass hysteria, hype and hysteria over COVID-19. Let me put this in context. From the onset of my intensified look into this pandemic, I was able to quickly conclude that we are being subjected to a lot of fake news to support what was essentially a, quote, fake epidemic. Allow me to step you through the first days and weeks of my breakdown of the news media stories which were hyping this misunderstanding, and how I searched for scandals or statistics and data-driven evidence by which these news stories could be corroborated. Here's what I wrote then. Quote, the current outbreak of coronavirus has captured global media attention. Other, far more threatening causes of morbidity and mortality rarely get this type of massive media coverage. Epidemics are sexy. Epidemics feed energy into a number of self-interested parties and become a means whereby a number of these parties exploit our fear and panic for financial, psychological, and political gain. I have been intensively studying a significant mass of information since becoming excited to explore this 2019 COVID infectious virus outbreak. What I have uncovered and verified as science-based understanding is rife with shocking observations. Among these were included, point 1, iatrogenic causes of death in the U.S. are estimated as high as 1.154 million in recent years. 2, annual flu deaths in the U.S. are projected by reporting agencies to range in number from 4,000 to 42,000 deaths. According to death certificates, all but a few hundred at most of these annual flu deaths involve pneumonia and influenza. Certified flu deaths without pneumonia are not reported as exceeding 500 cases in the U.S. for any year. Of these, only a fragment, less than 10%, are confirmed through testing for the presence of flu virus in these cadavers. Point 3. The coronavirus outbreak said to have begun in Wuhan, China on December 31st coincides with the so-called seasonal flu period. Point. Our first observations of this new infectious viral outbreak brought us to the realization that symptoms of coronavirus morbidity and mortality closely resemble the classic clinical description of pneumonia, severe acute lower respiratory disease. So I go on to explain a lot more background. This interesting from page 25. Again, this book is 200 pages long. So page 25 we're at. Death certificates listing flu without pneumonia as a primary cause of death in the U.S. less number less than 500 annually, while pneumonia deaths in the nation's top 49,000, according to the latest figures from the CDC's Fast Stats, National Center for Health Statistics, reporting. This puts the daily average for pneumonia deaths confirmed by death certificate listings at 135 deaths per day. As of February 3rd, when I first started looking behind the scenes at the current pandemic, reported deaths in China from coronavirus were numbered at 361 within widely published reports. Across the press, the ongoing outbreak of a novel coronavirus was being compared to the previous SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome, which sounds to me like pneumonia, outbreak of 2002 and 2003. The cause of SARS was alleged to have been a coronavirus named for the crown-like spikes on their surface. The SARS-CoV epidemic was reported to have killed 349 people in the People's Republic of China. According to the most recent estimates, for which we have direct reporting, there were some 125,000 pneumonia deaths reported annually in the period between 1985 and 2008 in China, as the published total of 5,237 cases of the earlier SARS-CoV infectious epidemic. It is reported had a fatality morbidity rate of 9.6%. In early February 2020, it was being reported that 2% of some 17,205 infected with the new coronavirus, 2019, had died. As I began tracing these rapidly changing morbidities and mortality statistics on the novel coronavirus, with particular focus on the pneumonia aspect of the disease, I was able to quickly and easily calculate that in general, no matter what nation where it was presented, the number of pneumonia deaths from the infection consistently measured between 0.83% and 0.89% of what would be expected of already established deaths from severe acute lower respiratory disease pneumonia. This was later confirmed within a report from the Oxford COVID-19 Evidence Service in March 2020, who reported a fatality rate resulting from pneumonia said to be caused by the infection at 0.85% outside the epicenter of Wuhan in the Chinese province of Hubei. It must be noted that this was happening during the height of the annual, quote, flu season, with its accompanying increase of pneumonia pathologies, severe acute lower respiratory infection syndrome, or SARS. So you can see I quickly came to realize that the problem was pneumonia and the deaths from pneumonia. Next subchapter expands on that, titled, Why Are the Elderly Suffering? Without a long introduction, here's what I got about this. What became apparent with the Italian study was that these and younger COVID-19 deaths were happening mainly to people with multiple serious diseases, illnesses. Quote, from the Italian study, more than 99% of Italy's coronavirus fatalities were people who suffered from previous medical conditions, according to a study by the country's National Health Authority. The new study could provide insight into why Italy's death rate at about 8% of total infected people is higher than in other countries. United States eventually came to about a 21% or so mortality. The Rome-based institute has examined medical records of about 18% of the country's coronavirus fatalities, finding that just 3 victims or 0.8% of the total had no previous pathology. Almost half of the victims suffered from at least 3 prior illnesses, and about a fourth had either one or two previous conditions. More than 75% had high blood pressure, about 35% had diabetes, and a third suffered from heart disease. The average age of those who died from the virus in Italy is 79.5 years of age. As of March 17, 17 people under 50 had died from the disease. All of Italy's victims under 40 have been males with serious existing medical conditions. Now, the Italian study was a significant breakthrough that helped me to understand the idea of comorbidities, which really came to explain why the elderly are dying. Point. The report from the Italian Nutrition Institute of Health analyzed 355 fatalities. Point. They found only 3 patients, 0.8%, had no prior medical conditions. Point. 99% who died had one pre-existing health condition. Point. 49% had 3 or more health conditions. Point. 26% had 2 other pathologies, and 25% had 1. The most common problem in the 355 who died were 76% high blood pressure, 36% diabetes, and 33% ischemic heart disease. The average age of deceased and COVID-19 positive patients was 79.5 years, median 80.5, range from 31 to 103. And so it just shows you that the elderly people were made up most of those fatalities. I say this to all of you in the audience. I'm going to move over to my next book here in just a second. But if you can I get you to hit the like button? It's very, very important that we collaborate, cooperate, work together. And I'm going to put this link up in case anybody wants to get their hands on this book that I'm reading from. Please do. I'm going to just share this with you right now. This is going up on the Rumble page, and I'm going to put it up here on the YouTube page. If you've never read this book, Panic, What the Coronavirus Pandemic Tells Us About the State of the World, hey, I've just gotten to page 29. And this is really important. I highlight certain things because this talks about the money trail. Follow the money. Follow the money. You've heard that. Medical providers are being paid to administer tests to, and hospitals are compensated for treating uninsured people. We know that blacks make up a disproportionate share of the uninsured. As well, because of the newly enacted national emergency legislation, hospitals are extended stipends for all COVID-19 diagnosis of $13,000 and $39,000 for ventilated patients. Thus, there is tremendous financial incentive for various healthcare providers for increased diagnosis. As well, this same coronavirus diagnosed cohort is more likely to have multiple pre-existing comorbidities. These include 1. Acute upper respiratory syndrome, colds and flu. 2. Acute lower respiratory disease, pneumonia. 3. Chronic lung diseases, COPD. 4. Hypertension. 5. Diabetes. 6. Cardiovascular diseases, coronary artery disease, atrial fibrillation, heart failure. 7. Kidney disease. 8. Chronic dehydration. 9. Cancer. 10. Metabolic syndrome. 11. Advanced age with accompanying geriatric features. 12. Encephalitis, which is meningitis and necrotizing encephalitis. 13. Immune suppression. 14. Autoimmune disorder, asthma, lupus, or sarcoidosis. 15. Blood clots. 16. Hyperlipidemia, excessive fat in the blood, high triglycerides. 17. Pediatric multi-system inflammatory syndrome, Kawasaki disease, shock syndrome. Number 18. Sensory impairment, loss of smell and taste. Number 19. Diarrhea. And number 20, conjunctivitis, pink eye. and 21 liver-associated pathology and cirrhosis, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Now, later, when I came back from a trip to Uganda, and I had been diagnosed, I knew I had malaria, and I had been diagnosed by the doctor of COVID-19. They put me in a special hospital that Koreans were coming in to rebuild this hospital. And I found out that that was because the Koreans were being paid by the World Health Organization funds to open up this hospital in Uganda, in Kampala. And I was the first patient in that new hospital. When I left the hospital, I think it was maybe 4 or 5 days later. I don't know. I was completely out and hallucinating and stuff. I couldn't tell. Malaria is a bad disease. When I got out, the hospital was full. It was full. So it happened in 1 week. It took over Uganda. So it goes on and on. We're talking about comorbidities. As well, those who are engineering the disease state of 2 or more of these comorbidities will produce a much higher level of IgA, IgM, and IgG containing blood plasma serum, which used for antibody testing will produce a high number of positive triggers. Among these high positive numbers of positive reacting tests are expected to be a significant number of false positives. This is referred to as a surveillance bias, a subject to which we must return during our study. So there's a lot of numbers as I'm breaking down this, as it's coming in. I'm writing all of this. I predict that based upon the current trajectory, and I'm going to get out of this book after these bullet points, there will be increased morbidity and mortality within this nation, many to be blamed on COVID-19 antibody detection. Point 1, a consequence of national population increases of 0.6% for the U.S. Point 2, natural increase in per capita deaths, rising at a current rate of 1.2% annually. 3, cancer deaths continue to escalate yearly. 4, the demographic bubble called the baby boomers, those born between 46 and 64, are now reaching the age of average lifespan for the nation. 5, the decades-long increase year on year of chronic diseases. 6, surveillance bias unquestionably occurring as the nation's health-related facilities are searching for COVID-19 in their operations. 7, due to the treatment procedures for COVID-19 and other acute lower respiratory diagnosis, there will be a notable rise in deaths. And so I go on, 15 reasons why I predict there will be this ongoing rise in coronavirus death. Next chapter is entitled A Brief Tutorial on Viruses. I'm going to make this real quick. This is so important to this book. Begin with this quote from Virology blog. Viruses are not living things. Viruses are complicated assemblies of molecules, proteins, nucleic acids, lipids, and carbohydrates. But on their own, they can do nothing until they enter a living cell. Without cells, viruses could not be able to multiply. Therefore, viruses are not living things. We have to understand that. You've been told, we're going to kill the virus. It's not alive in the first place. It's a chemical molecule, chemical formula. That's it. Viruses. They're not moving. They're not jumping around. They're not doing a thing. In fact, if you're looking for what is a virus, you need to look at exosomes. Put this question in a high-quality search engine. Don't put it up on Google. Google's really contaminated. Put this up in a high-quality search engine. I use Perplexity for my search engine. Put this up. Ask this question. What is a virus? The second question, what is an exosome? E-X-O-S-O-M-E. And third, what's the difference between a virus and an exosome? If you ask those 3 questions in sequence, you will find out what they are calling virus is an exosome, and very likely could very well be that an exosome is, like Dr. Lai Laverick said, nothing but a piece of a dead, broken up cell. Viruses are viral debris. What is a virus? For all the talk about viruses which drones on unceasingly across news media without conversations about cell biology, and now around our dinner tables, it never ceases to surprise me of the absolute minuscule number of people who can even answer a near accurate response to this simple question. What is a virus? Skipping forward to the next page, let's answer the question. I use this inquiry as basis for my daily webcasts. We're going on for 18 years. I talk about to each of these 4-word questions I posted and am sharing. There are 10 scientific responses. What does the establishment say? All of these are establishment sources. I'm just going to share 3 of these. What is a virus? Live Science wrote an article, What are viruses? Viruses are microscopic parasites, generally much smaller than bacteria. They lack the capacity to thrive and reproduce outside of a host body. Well, if it's a parasite, parasites can reproduce, but viruses can't. That's because their viruses are not microscopic parasites. Bacteria also can reproduce. Answer number 2. Viruses' structure, function, and uses from the National Institutes of Health Molecular Cell Biology 4th edition. Quote, a virus is a small parasite that cannot reproduce by itself. Once it infects a susceptible cell, however, a virus can direct the cell machinery to produce more viruses. Most viruses have either RNA or DNA as their genetic material. The nucleic acid may be single or double-stranded. The entire infectious virus particle, called a virion, consists of the nucleic acid and an outer shell of protein. The simplest viruses contain only enough RNA or DNA to encode 4 proteins. The most complex can control 100 to 200 proteins. Now, that one, they're saying it can control all of this. It cannot reproduce, but it can direct the production of itself to 200 times. That doesn't really make any logical sense. The third answer, Science News for Students Explainer, what is a virus? Not quite alive or dead. These infectious agents prey on the living. Viruses are sometimes confused with another family of germs, bacteria. But viruses are much, much smaller. Think of a virus as a tiny packet jacketed in a protein covering. Inside is either DNA or RNA. Each molecule serves as an instruction book. Its genetic information provides instructions to tell a cell what to make and when to make it. Now, finally, I get to my definition of a virus. A virus, simple strands of DNA covered by a double lipid protein sheath. So I'm just skipping forward to that. The second 4-letter question I asked you, are viruses living entities? Let me go with responses. Ooh, these are long. Let's go with number 3 from Virology blog. Are viruses living? Viruses are not living things. Viruses are complicated assemblies of molecules including proteins, nucleic acids, lipids, and carbohydrates. But on their own, they can do nothing until they enter a living cell. Without cells, viruses would not be able to multiply. Therefore, viruses are not living things. Number 2, USC News. Researchers teases out secrets from surprisingly intelligent quote-unquote viruses. Listen, they say viruses are very intelligent. They can think. They do things that we do not expect. They adapt to the environment. They change themselves in order to survive, said Lai, professor of molecular biology and immunology and a Howard Hughes Medical Institute investigator. The reason why some high school biology teachers might argue with his stance, Lee notes, is that a virus can be crystallized similar to non-living matter. Plus, viruses depend on other living things to reproduce. And lastly, from Science Daily, virus. It has been argued extensively whether viruses are living organisms. Most virologists consider them non-living, as they do not meet all of the criteria of the generally accepted definition of life. They are similar to obligate intracellular parasites, as they lack the means for self-reproduction outside a host cell. But unlike parasites, viruses are generally not considered to be true living organisms. So that's the answer to the question. Viruses are not alive. And I give you 10 different sources, credible sources. So lastly, I'm actually going to go forward. That was less than 25% of the book, and we skimmed over it as well. Panic with the coronavirus pandemic tells us about the state of the world. It tells us about the state of science. It tells us about the state of mass media. It tells us about Google, which I'm about to say a cuss word before I say Google. But Google threw me out for challenging them. And you can see, I hope you could see, I was very scientific about what I do. Greetings to you, Brother Shabaka. I see you in the house today, and LAB family. It's great to have you in the house, Brother Shabaka. I thank you for all you do for all of us. And you should have received at least one book from me recently. I know people did order the book, the new one, Biocolonialism, and I'm yet to receive my copies to be able to ship out to larger people. I did buy 4 copies from the retail at the beginning, but those 4 copies, I even sold mine when somebody came by the house. So that's that. Here's the book I have in my hand, Fade to Black, The Passing of a Great Race. And when this book was published, I was depressed. I got depressed. The book is very extensive. It's a longer book. This was how many pages? Probably about 275 pages or more. And it was really hard for me to write and publish this book. 1 second. And let me turn my mic back on when I finish. Okay, I am back. Fade to Black, The Passing of a Great Race. At a time of rapid change, the best informed competitor has the most significant advantage. As a social, ethnic, or racial group, we, Africans born anywhere in the world, have an absolute right to exist as a group. As individuals within the larger body, members of this group have obligations to do that which is within our abilities to assure that our race survives and thrives. The long historical record unquestionably demonstrates that our group of global African descended people has had to struggle, often violently, to protect our group from ruthless exploitation, toxic racism, robbery, and crimes against humanity, including genocide. This record of anti-African actions is unbroken for nearly 3,000 years, when savage hordes from Western Asia and Europe invaded the African continent and brutalized our ancestors' territories because of our racial, ethnic, and national identities. Since the beginning of our experience in what is now the territories of the United States of America, assaults against our bodies, minds, and spirits, culture, and labors have been continuous. These violations have periodically escalated into mob violence and mass murder at the hands of the dominating majority, who have always viewed us through the filter of xenophobia, fear of the other. Ours is a long and sacred journey, because there have been so many assaults against our existential being for so long. We must try to comprehend what has been occurring against us. We act today to preserve life, liberty, health, wealth, and sustainable prosperity for the next 20 generations to follow ours. If we do not act today, we will lose our tomorrows. That's the back cover intro to Fade to Black. This book is so important. Let me give you the introduction, and then I'm going to skip forward to talk about the patterns of behavior. The first chapter, here's a quote from Marcus Garvey. Two quotes. The first one, the thing to do is to get organized. Keep separated and you will be exploited. You will be robbed. You will be killed. Get organized and you will compel the world to respect you. He writes, Africa, with 400 million black people, can do it. If you cannot do it, if you are not prepared to do it, then you will die. You race of cowards. You race of imbeciles. You race of good-for-nothings. If you cannot do what other men have done, what other nations have done, what other races have done, then you had better die. Marcus Garvey. I begin with chapter 1, is entitled Eugenics, Genocide, and Race Suicide. This quote from W.E. Du Bois, it is doubtful if there is another group of 12 million people in the midst of a modern cultured land who are so widely inhibited and mentally confined as the American Negro. Within the colored race, the philosophy of salvation has, by the pressure of caste, become curiously twisted and distorted. Shall they use the torch and dynamite? Shall they go north or fight it out in the south? Shall they segregate themselves even more than they are now in states, towns, cities, or sections? Shall they leave the country? Are they Americans or foreigners? Shall they stand and sing My Country, 'Tis of Thee? Shall they marry and rear children and save and buy homes? Or deliberately commit race suicide? W.E.B. Du Bois, writing in Black Reconstruction, 1935. The final solution to an American dilemma. As I write, mid-August 2020, the world is deep into several crises that threaten to bring on another global depression that could match or exceed that which occurred nearly a century ago. The multifaceted global crisis referred to as the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted individual lives, family, community, government affairs, societal functioning, every level of business engagement, intentional international relations, and the entire progress of humans. In May 2020, my book, Panic, I shared 200-page report with 173 references to debunk so much of that which we have been misled to assume as the truth of the pandemic. To fully comprehend what is in this new book, Fade to Black, The Passing of a Great Race Reveals, I highly recommend reading Panic. Read it and understand it as well. In chapter 2 of this book, I list my previous books, each with a brief synopsis of the major points that makes these books still relevant. And I've been reading all of these books. They are still relevant. Still relevant, still relevant. I started writing these books 30 years ago and I've been reading them for all of this month, 2 books per day. And you understand, my books are timeless. There are basic concepts that I really must emphasize that my readers comprehend toward appreciating the body of published work that I have worked so hard to create. Some of the most important of these foundational comprehensions include, but are most definitely not limited to, point. As a social, ethnic, or racial group, we, Africans born anywhere in the world, have an absolute right to exist as a group. 2, as individuals within a larger body, members of this group have obligations to do that which is within our abilities to assure that our race survives and thrives. And I'm going forward because I'm repeating part of which is on the back cover. A comprehensive list of crimes against our group would entail multiple volumes to fully demonstrate the struggles which we have long had to combat. These assaults continue on a daily, weekly, and annual basis against those who are identified as African American, Afro-Brits, as well as our sisters and brothers living in other Anglo-American dominated countries such as Canada and Australia, extending also in the Spanish-speaking countries. Quote, point, there does exist a cabal, a secret organization, a manipulative oligarchy, so-called deep state, that can be proven to engage in covert and clandestine schemes that are designed to undermine our group's progress, integrity, wealth, and global identity as African people. And there are a bunch of different bullet points. It's all really good. As well, these hidden persuaders use mass media and systemic social engineering toward the aim of infecting the subconscious mind And that's happening. Somehow, somewhere, it's turning itself on and off. I'm not doing that. I turn it back on. Hey, stuff happens. And I'm reading, and reading. I'm going to have to throw away today's dialogue because it's got these big, huge blank parts in it. It's not me. Genocide. According to the United States description, the word genocide was first coined by Polish lawyer Raphael Lemkin in 1944 in his book Axis Rule in Occupied Europe. It consisted of the Greek prefix genus, meaning race or tribe, and the Latin suffix "cide," meaning killing. Quote, genocide was first recognized as a crime under international law in 1946 by the United Nations General Assembly. It was codified as an independent crime in the 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. So I'm going to skip over that because we've heard a lot of that recently because of Israeli behavior toward Palestinians. And I'm sorry, Brother Eddie McCroy. He says, couldn't hear you from about 40 minutes ago. I apologize, but I know I turned it back on. And we're talking about genocide. What are the conditions which define genocide? Have 5 conditions. Number 1, killing members of the group. At present, the Genocide Convention means any of the following acts committed with intention to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group, such as 1. Point A, killing members of the group. B, causing serious bodily harm or mental harm to members of the group. C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. 4, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. And 5, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. There was, in 1951, a petition that was submitted to the United Nations on the part of black people from a group calling itself the Civil Rights Congress, CRC, to formally charge the U.S. against genocide. They presented this petition at their case in Paris, France. It read in no small part. It read in part. The document pointed at the United Nations Convention. This is about the document. Pointed at the United Nations. The document pointed out that the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide defined genocide as any act committed with intent to destroy a group in whole or in part. To build its case for black genocide, the document cited many instances of lynching in the United States, as well as legal discrimination, disenfranchisement, and of blacks in the South, a series of incidents of police brutality dating to the present, and systemic inequalities in health and quality of life. The central argument: the U.S. and government is both complicit with and responsible for a genocidal situation based on the UN's own definition of genocide. So the response of the U.S. government to the CRC petition to the UN was swift and harsh. As the nation was caught up in the anti-communist ideology of the Cold War, the first charge was that the CRC was a communist conspiracy. CRC Secretary William L. Patterson, after having presented the case in a document entitled "We Charge Genocide," had his passport seized by the U.S. immediately upon his return in January 1952. Patterson's humiliation at the hands of his government continued for years. The 1951 presentation, which I do have in small part, I quote from it a couple of paragraphs, and then later in the appendix for the book, I have the entire "We Charge Genocide" document, which takes up several pages. But let me just give you from the quotes. We charge genocide. The historical petition to the United Nations for relief from a crime of the United States government against the Negro people, 1951. Introduction. Out of the inhumane black ghettos of American cities, out of cotton plantations of the South, comes this record of mass slayings on the basis of race, of lives deliberately warped and distorted by the willful creation of conditions making for premature death, poverty, and disease. It is a record that calls aloud for condemnation, for an end to these terrible injustices that constitute a daily and ever increasing violation of the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crimes of Genocide. It is sometimes incorrectly thought that genocide means the complete and definitive destruction of a race or a people. The Genocide Convention, however, adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations on December 9, 1948, defines genocide as any killings on a base of race, or in its specific words as, quote, killing members of the group, unquote. Any intention to destroy in whole or in part a national, racial, ethnic, or religious group is genocide, according to the convention. Thus, the convention states causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group is genocide as well as killing members of the group. We maintain, therefore, that the oppressed Negro citizens of the United States, segregated, discriminated against, and long the target of violence, suffer from genocide as the result of the consistent, conscious, unified policies of every branch of government. So I'm going to have to skip forward to, it's a good document, which is why I included it all, but we got to get to this subject of race suicide. It appears at times that there is somewhat a thin line of distinction that separates these three sides of eugenics, genocide, and race suicide. This designation of, quote, race suicide was reportedly coined by an early 20th century pro-eugenics sociologist, Edward A. Ross. According to dictionary.com, this idea translates to, quote, the extinction of a racial or ethnic population that tends to result when, through the unwillingness or forbearance of its members to have children, the birth rate falls below the death rate. For the intended purposes of this book, I write, which examines the declining death fall fate of Africans within certain advanced countries over the coming decades, we need to expand the definition of race suicide. An excellent place is to continue to share this quote from the noted black scholar and historian W.E. Du Bois, which I cited a little bit earlier. It is doubtful that another group of 12 million people in the midst of a modern cultured land who are so widely inhabited and mentally confined as the American Negro, and his last sentence of that, shall they marry and rear children and save and buy homes, or deliberately commit race suicide? From Black Reconstruction, 1935. As stated earlier, it's hard to distinguish the activities of hostile external groups against a targeted enemy from those behaviors which have been adopted by the subjected group that contributed to the weakening or demise of the people. I have written about such unconsciously adopted self-limiting behaviors in several books, focusing on behavioral modification and social engineering. The techniques and methodologies of those instigating these campaigns comprise what I have long referred to as, quote, population wars, culture wars. Under this state of organized affairs, members of the target society themselves adopt patterns of behaviors, actions, logic, and morality that undermines their ability to survive and thrive within the nation. These targeted communities take on such behaviors both consciously and unconsciously. Going forward. Here's another quote I share from American Dilemma, the Negro Problem and Modern Democracy. Myrdal wrote on page 165, quote, popular theories on the growth of the Negro population in America have been diverse. At times it has been claimed that, quote, Negroes breed like rabbits, unquote, and that they will ultimately crowd out the whites if they are not deported or their procreation restricted. At other times it has been pronounced that they are a, quote, dying race, unquote, bound to lose out in the struggle for survival. Statistics both of the comprehensive kind in the United States Census and the limited kind gathered in sample surveys have been used to bolster both arguments. From my 1998 book, Missing Assets, Cultural, Psychological, and Biological Origins of Infertility, I share this quote, once again, which originated from my friend and teacher, Elizabeth Liagun Sobel. Quote, in other words, for population control to succeed, a great deal more must be done than to merely establish family planning centers and provide surreptitious funding for local advocacy campaigns. An entire spectrum of variables affecting the desire to have children must be influenced, from basic economics and government programs to family relations, personal expectations, lifestyle, cultural tradition, concepts of land sharing and private ownership, wealth production systems, ethical standards, and even religious beliefs. Taboos must be breached. The bonds that unite family and community must be undermined, and sufficient disruption must occur to literally disorient the targeted communities and make them vulnerable to the imposition of external cultural forces. So let's go forward. We're talking about the practice of race suicide is based upon this subconscious, unconscious acceptance of new ideas, values, morality, and tolerated behaviors that collectively make the group vulnerable to eugenics and genocide. Because these self-destructive behaviors are, for the most part, voluntary, unconscious selection, I thus classify them as race suicide. Marcus Garvey famously said, quote, if the Negro is not careful, he will drink in all the poison of modern civilization and die from the effects of it, unquote. Such race suicide behaviors include, but are not limited to, point one, dismissing ancestral cultural patterns and adopting the culture of the antagonistic group. Culture is spirituality, language, traditions, historical perspective, morality, and logical modes of thought. Point two, people of African lineage in many diaspora countries have no empowering motivation to genetic nationality that would link us to another 1.284 billion of our group located around the world. Many Afro-Americans will openly claim that they are not Africans, but are a distinct subgroup of Americans created as descendants of the enslaved. For too many of this group, the African motherland is perceived as a desolate wasteland. Its people a source of shame and emotional disconnect. Point three, failing to maintain the sanctity of the family, particularly the relationships and accompanying social patterns that sustain the birth and rearing of children to be self-sustaining, healthy adulthood, or to self-sustaining, healthy adulthood. Point four, widespread adoption of lifestyle patterns, which lead to poor health, high morbidity, and excessive mortality among members of the group. These poor health lifestyles lead to disproportionate rates of overweight, obesity, cardiovascular disease, cancer, metabolic diseases, autoimmune disorders, infertility, and other disease stresses that have become disproportionately common among blacks. And excuse me for the length of this list, this is what we're doing. It comprises race suicide. Next point, failure to maintain sufficient land for farming, housing, and building industries to supply the needs of members of the group. Afro-American dependence upon the surplus of other ethnic groups' production has placed us in perilous condition, especially during times of significant economic stress. African Americans in 1912 owned almost 6.5 to 7 times the amount of farmland that we own now, going from 19 million to about 3 million acres. Point, internecine conflict, otherwise referred to as, quote, black on black crime, affects African Americans more than any other group in the world even equaling nations engaged in civil warfare. Point: the use of entertainment media to program behaviors among members of the group, especially those communications targeted at young, childbearing age people, become race suicide when black producers of the programs are guilty of undermining our collective values. Point: a persistent culture of anti-intellectualism has captured large segments of the Afri-Amer population. Public school systems are near collapse. Functional literacy continues in a steep downward spiral. 3 more points. A widespread culture of individualism, narcissism, inability to share resources, and disassociation with the needs of the group has infected our members. While other groups can use ethnic identity to obtain distinct advantages for their group competition, blacks in many developed societies have become averse to such ethnic-specific orientation. 2 more points. The spectrum of ethnic dishes that are collectively known as soul food is generally so bad for maintaining disease-free living that I've come to refer to this dietary pattern as, quote, chewicide. Within your cultural cuisine, when your cultural cuisine causes such widespread disease and disorder, you end up eating yourself to death. And lastly, more than 3/4 of black babies are born outside of the protection of the institution of marriage. Delay of birth of the first child to black women is thus impacted. Total fertility to Afri-Amer women has steadily declined with each passing generation, and now at 1.77 total fertility rate ranks far below the 2.1 childbirths per woman needed to stabilize population numbers. And this next one is really devastating. You got to hear this, though. Left at the altar of abortion. There are on average 850 black pregnancies aborted every day in America, 3% of which would have been expected to be multiple births. If we make the absolute presumption that black lives do matter, I ask, do black unborn lives matter as well? Looking at the multi-ethnic faces of seas of protesters across this nation raising the banner of Black Lives Matter, I cannot help but wonder how many of those same protesters are diehard supporters of, quote, a woman's choice, unquote, to use abortion as a life convenience. Many of these same ones hollering and hullabalooing about law enforcement violence disproportionately affecting African Americans will, during any other given week, be championing for the cause of Planned Parenthood, the demon seed creation of the rabid eugenicist Margaret Sanger. When Sanger formed the Birth Control Society, one of her aims was to slow down births to black women, deemed by many eugenicists to be of low social class and lesser genetic quality. To make their advocacy more acceptable to the mainstream populations, the Birth Control Society's name change was changed to Planned Parenthood. And that idea of birth control for undesirable people was changed to the desirability of, quote, family planning, unquote. Over the past century and going into overdrive in the era since decriminalization of abortion with the 1973 Supreme Court decision in Roe v. Wade, initial reluctance on the part of the black community to accept the practice has flipped. Now it has come to the fact that in certain cities, most black pregnancies end up in abortion, a practice that I refer to as infanticide. And Jesse Jackson was one of those ones. The first 2 or 3 years after Roe v. Wade, Jesse Jackson and others claimed that it was a plot against black people. Yet, when he ran for president in 1988, he flipped because he wanted to please the liberal people who were in control of the dominant media. He flipped, and then he said, it's a woman's choice. I'm not going to spend much time on Jesse Jackson because I really despise the man. Adoption and advocacy of abortions among Afri-Americans has killed off the unborn at such a sustained rate that 1/3 of the should-be current population of blacks in the United States have been exterminated. This missing element would comprise the youngest cohort for our group. Blacks have served up an estimated 22.27 million pregnancies to abortion since 1973, half of which would have been female. And this book, again, comes out in 2020, so the attrition is still going on. Half of which would have been female, thus eliminating a family in the next generation. Cumulatively, this could amount to between 34 to 42 million children's lives interrupted due to abortions to Afro-American women. If we only consider the number of abortions to blacks in their diaspora nations of habitation, abortion itself would indicate the most significant demographic injury to the group, whether self-inflicted or put upon us by hostile external antagonists. As this pattern continues, with an additional 310,000 abortions to the group each year on average, there is no chance of surviving this fertility crash beyond the next 45 years. Our national reality at that point will be a small, aged population of blacks with an insufficient familiar network of children and grandchildren to sustain healthy upkeep for their senior community. This hazardous nature of this collapse is catastrophic. About the black people who once inhabited that region, which was known as in history as Mesopotamia, the ancient riddle asks, what happened to the people of Sumer? They disappeared because they forgot their history. The only place to find Sumerians today is in museums. In most such museums, the images of these noble people have been altered from African blacks to light brown Western Asians. What was the fate of Native Americans, I ask? Because you got to see this in context. You see it happening, but you don't recognize it because you don't see the pattern. I'm sometimes challenged by those who disagree with my more frequently stated position that Afro-Americans have only 45 more years of viability left before we disappear from this nation's active history. Our situation is similar to an estimated 80 First Peoples nations which occupied these lands of the USA at the time of arrival of the first European colonizers, and might I call them, instead of colonizers, genocidaires. Like these disappeared Native Americans, blacks are on course to virtually disappear and lose all semblance of political or economic visibility, only to be found in museums after that. Many U.S. states, cities, rivers, and other geographical locations bear names from the languages of once large tribal nations. In these same areas, most of those tribal members have disappeared from the spaces that carry their legacy through these names. Just a small sample of such words include Ohio. It's an Iroquois word meaning good river. Minnesota, a Dakota word meaning turbid water. Mississippi, Algonquian language of Ojibwe, meaning big river. Tuskegee, Coasati word meaning warriors. Tucson, Pima Odam, meaning black base. Potomac River, Piscataway language meaning they bring it. Appalachia, Choctaw, meaning people. Miami, in Florida as a Native American name for Lake Okeechobee and the Miami River. Pensacola, Choctaw, a name for another group, the Muskegon, meaning hair people. Pontiac, named after an Odawa war chief. Seattle, named after the Lushootseed tribal chief. The state of Iowa was named after the people who inhabited the lands surrounding the Iowa River. The state of Wisconsin got its name from the native Miami people's word for the major river serving the area. The largest of the first people nations that were disrupted by the colonization of what is today the USA included great confederations with names such as Cherokee, Navajo, Choctaw, Sioux, Chippewa, Apache, Blackfeet, Iroquois, and Pueblo. Some of these great nations still exist, but have been significantly decreased in numbers and territory. Others have virtually disappeared and can only be studied as museum relics. There were many First People tribal nations in today's states of New York, Ohio, and Oklahoma. In New York, their tribal names included Abenaki, Cayuga, Erie, Laurentian, Mohawk, Mohican, Mohegan, and Mohegan, Munsee, Delaware, Oneida, Puspatuk, Ukengog, excuse me, but I don't know, and other Seneca tribes. Ohio knew such tribal names as the Erie, Kickapoo, and Shawnee tribes. And it goes on. At the crossroads, our 45-year fate. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to have to skip forward. There's another section of this where I talk about the myth of Black Lives Matter. And we talk about this. We have been reporting this. All of my books, I list my books up to this date. But the myth of Black Lives Matter is very, very important. This quote begins the book from Urban Meyer, football coach. Now I understood. Average leaders have quotes. Good leaders have a plan. Exceptional leaders have a system. I talk about the superficiality of sloganeering, just to wrap up this Black Lives Matter. While they may have merit, beyond feeble attempts to raise self-esteem, what have they ultimately amounted to that lead to group viability? Such as, you remember these popular chants? I am a man. I am somebody. Burn, baby, burn. What time is it? Nation time. Keep hope alive. You know, most of those, I just listed 5 of them. 3 of them can be attributed to Jesse Jackson, popularizing them. Now you see why American media loved Jesse Jackson. I didn't. Black power and other quotes. We used to chant, Black power, black is beautiful. Yes, we can. No justice, no peace. Black lives matter. So you can see my point. The chanting slogans has a bad track record for producing tangible outcomes or long-term sustainable development. At best, it can be regarded as an instrument to synchronize mind states. I do a detailed breakdown for each of these popular cliches over the years, but that's not necessarily going to be any more productive than are these slogans. I intend to point out the terrible contradiction between the current popular chant, quote, Black Lives Matter, unquote, and the reality of black life mattering in the United States. Skipping down. Killer cops are just the tip of the iceberg. The nation awoke today to the news of yet another police shooting of an unarmed black man. According to morning news reports, Jacob Blake, a 29-year-old black man, was shot 7 times in the back by one of 2 Kenosha, Wisconsin police officers. He was accosted by the cops after Blake, stopped to try and break up a physical altercation between 2 women. According to the latest reports, Jacob Blake is alive and in intensive care after surgery for the gunshots. The incidents took place about 5 p.m. on Sunday. By nightfall, multiple protests had risen in the area with reports of numerous arson fires and a citywide curfew. In most cases, the victim of the police shooting was initially survived being shot. In this case, he survived being shot 7 times in the back. Yet across the nation, 2.8 times every day, police kill an African civilian. Just a couple of bullet points on these killings. Point, as reported by the Federal Bureau of Investigation for 2019, 48 law enforcement officers were killed by felonious acts of the total of 89 who were killed in line of duty incidents during the year. Point two, compared to other nations, U.S. police kill civilians at a much higher rate than police in other wealthy nations. According to a January 2020 report from the Prison Policy Initiative, when compared to the next 5 countries singled out in their report, Canada, Australia, the Netherlands, New Zealand, and Germany, the U.S. rate of cop killings of civilians was 7 times higher than the average of the next 5. Compared to Germany, American police killed its citizens as a ratio of more than 25 to 1. At an annual average of 33.5 per 10 million citizens killed by law enforcement each year, based on a 2020 national population of 329.5 million, about 1,104 people were killed by police each year in the U.S. In May 2018, Olga Kassan, writing in The Atlantic, reported on these killings by law enforcement officers. She wrote, of the 1,146 and 1,092 victims of police violence in 2015 and 2016, respectively, the authors found that 52% were white, 26% were black, and 17% were Hispanic. Together, these individuals lost 57,375 years to police violence in 2015 and 54,754 to police violence in 2016. Young people and people of color were disproportionately affected. 52% of the years of life loss belong to non-whites, non-Hispanic groups. Whites also tended to be killed by police at older ages than African Americans and Hispanics, though this is partially because in general population, whites are older on average than other groups. And it goes on, a couple of other points. But you got to hear this. Compared to nationally reported killings of our group's members by law enforcement officers, each year, blacks kill others of our group at a ratio of 8.5 to 1. For every one the police kill, our group members kill 8.5. Compared to law enforcement killings, bad medical practices, iatrogenics, kill blacks at a ratio of 585 to 1. Abortion kills black babies at a ratio of 1,067 compared to every one cop killing within the United States. 1,067. It's called race suicide. We talk about internecine violence, brother killing brother. The next subchapter deals with death by doctor, iatrogenics. And compared to 2016 published figures on police homicides of 1,180 to all Americans, slightly over 400 for blacks, we can easily calculate that gross disproportionate rate of medically induced mortality. For every African American killed that year, 2016, by law enforcement, 425 were killed at the hands of legal medicine. For all Americans, the ratio was 975 to 1. So that's for 2016, 971, 5 to 1 for police killings of Americans, but for blacks, 425, nearly half of that matter. Do Black lives matter? When it comes to the medical industries that are doing the killing, perhaps they do not really matter that much. Our group's failure to rise and take a stance against this attrition confirms that this concept of BLM is just another example of superficial sloganeering. And then we talk about infanticide, self-administered. I point out Planned Parenthood because it is the organization with the greatest association with abortion in America. Its founder was Margaret Sanger, and she wrote, and we do not want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. And the minister is the man who can straighten that out, that idea, if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members. That was called the Negro Project. And that was run by Margaret Sanger, instigated by Margaret Sanger. And You Are All About to Die, Chapter 12, linking many of the health crises in the black community. And this is very important. It's the critical importance of health in the gut. We talk about all these diseases and disorders, all inflammatory conditions, a whole bunch. I do see a comment from For Africa One. She writes, a woman I once knew made her daughter have an abortion because she wasn't ready to be a grandmother. That's pretty devastating. Didn't want to be a grandmother. She forced her daughter to have an abortion, when in actuality, our first daughter surprised us, and we formed a family based upon that surprise. She announced, I'm coming, y'all. Get ready. Can you get married first? And we forged a family around that and had all of our children by one mother, one father. And it brought joy into our lives. One of the greatest mistakes I ever made was losing that family. I tried to hold on, but didn't have the strength at that time to be able to hold on. But now we know so much better. So that's sad. It's sad. We're going to keep going forward, though. I want to thank you all for tuning in today. Let me put up a link to get the second book that we covered today. This book, Fade to Black, The Passing of a Great Race. I hope you get it. At one point, this book was moving. We talked about this one quite a bit on the mastermind, and for good reason. Those numbers cannot be avoided. The long-term prognosis is fade to black, the passing of a great race. We're watching this passing. Those of you who are aged 30 to 35 or so, most likely you will witness this collapse but will not notice it. It's like the proverbial frog in a pot of boiling water. You put the frog in when the water is cool, and then you turn on the heat, and the heat gradually rises until eventually the frog is boiled to death, but the frog does not respond. That's what we're witnessing. I can't describe it any better than that or any worse than that. So I want to thank you all for tuning in today. We've been doing, I think, a big, beautiful job showcasing all these books. Excuse me, I've been struggling with dry lips the whole time. Talk. Need to hydrate. But we've been doing the best we can. It's still not yet good enough. So we're going to do even better. I had to get my camera to focus again. I thank you all for tuning in to your favorite. We aim to be your favorite. We are LIB Radio, LIB TV. We are livinginblack.com. Tell your friends. Bring more people to the show. And I got to say, I'm very proud because since we've been doing this entire series, my book sales increased and are currently at the highest rate they've been since, wait a minute, get this right. My book rate sales have definitely increased, and it's a good thing too. Where are we at? There we are. My book rate, sales rate from the Amazon page are at the highest sales rate they've been since December 2023. But we've got a lot of ground to catch up. I want to thank those of you who have bought at least one of the books this month or last month. Some of you have been getting a number of them. Six or so books. Somebody yesterday got 6 or so books, or might have been more than one person. But this is how I live. I write books. I sell books. Believe it or not, this evening I will see my third book that's been published within the last 6 weeks or so. And also, I am currently editing my final edit on another book to follow that. Let me give you the title of the new book right now. I'm very excited about it. I've got it up here. Oh, it's called Steamships. You know, I've been talking about STEM, and our vision is not STEM, not STEAM, but steamships. We stretched out the acronym. Science, technology, engineering, arts, mathematics, spirituality, holistic health, innovation, prosperity, and sustainability. So that book is going to be coming. I have another one coming out. You're going to see it tomorrow. I'll show you the cover of it. I'm very excited. Bear with me. Chewing on my lip. But that's embarrassing. My lips get so dry that they're peeling in the middle of a show. It's a lot of work. This is a lot of self-sacrifice that I'm doing. And I know many of you do appreciate it. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep striving. We're going to keep struggling. And we are going to keep bringing home victories for our people. I thank you all for tuning in today. You have been tuned into your favorite. We aim to be your favorite. We are LIB Radio, LIB TV. We are truly, truly living in black. And we're loving this blackness. It is a good thing. It's a beautiful thing. I am an African. And I am very proud to call myself an African. Ain't no FBA, ain't no ADOS. We don't dibby. I am a very proud African. Like Marcus Garvey. He was very proud. Ashe yo. And Steamships, you know that book is dedicated to the memory of Marcus Garvey and the UNIA for their efforts to bring us to a whole new level of being who we are and why our people are needed at this time to come back to our natural senses. Peace and prosperity to each and every one of you. On your favorite, we aim to be your favorite. We are LIB Radio, LIB TV, living in black.com. Peace, y'all.